Last week we listened to music. This week we're going to go to the places that inspired a great deal of it. The islands. Scotland has over 900 of them, depending on how you count, and they range from small rocky outcrops that barely qualify as land to full island groups, with their own distinct cultures, their own dialects, their own relationship with the mainland that is sometimes warm and sometimes complicated, and often both. They're the edges of Scotland, the places where the country runs out of land and meets the Atlantic, and they have a quality that's hard to describe and impossible to forget once you've felt it. This is also the last episode of Series 1, and I'm glad we're finishing here, because if Scotland has a soul, and I think it does, a significant part of it is in the islands. In the light off the water, the silence between the hills, and the particular feeling of being somewhere that has its own pace, its own rules, its own relationship with time. The Scots word for home is hame, and for a lot of people, islands they have never lived on feel more like home than anywhere else they have been. I find that beautiful, and I find it true. I should be upfront about something before we go any further. Some of these islands I know really well. Skye in particular. I've spent a great deal of time on Skye doing tours, and I have thoughts about it, some of them more controversial than you might expect. Others, like Orkney, Shetland and the Outer Hebrides, are on my list. Firmly on my list. I'll be honest about which is which as we go, because I think it's more useful to you than pretending I've been everywhere. I'm Lesley Kennedy. This is Everything Scotland. Let's go to the islands. First, I want to talk about Skye, and I want to do it honestly, which means I'm probably going to say something that people in the Scottish tourism industry don't really say very often, and certainly not out loud. Yes, Skye is beautiful. It is also, in my view, the most overrated of all the Scottish islands. And I say that as someone who has spent a great deal of time there and who genuinely loves it. The Skye that exists on Instagram is real. It's there. The dramatic ridgeline of the Cuillin Mountains, the Old Man of Storr against a moody sky, the fairy pools, clear and turquoise in the morning light. That Skye exists. I have seen it. But there is a version of Skye that most summer visitors experience, and it looks completely different. Let me tell you about the fairy pools in July. The fairy pools are a series of waterfalls and pools on the River Brittle at the foot of the Cuillin Mountains. And in those carefully edited Instagram photographs, they look like something from a fairy tale. Crystal clear waters, nobody around, the mountains towering above, total seclusion. They're beautiful. They are also, in July and August, about as secluded as a theme park during school holidays. The car park is full to bursting. The path is busy in both directions. And bizarrely, the path back to the car park is far longer and much more arduous than the path up to the fairy pools, which catches a lot of people out. By the time you arrive at the pools themselves, you're sharing them with a significant number of other people who have had the same Instagram post in mind. Yes, the pools are still beautiful. They're just not quiet. And the beauty of the fairy pools, the real beauty of them, is inseparable from that quiet. Now, I'm not saying don't go to Skye. Please, go. I'm just saying go in April or May or maybe September or October when the light is still incredible and the crowds have thinned and you can actually hear the island. That's the Skye worth going to. The summer Skye, the Instagram Skye, It's a version of the place with all the space and silence edited out. And the space and silence are the whole point. With that said, and I needed to say it, let me tell you what Skye actually is. Because away from the Instagram hotspots and the summer crowds, it's one of the most dramatic and compelling places in Scotland. The Cuillin Mountains are the most challenging mountain range in Britain. Not the highest, but the most technical, the most unforgiving, with ridgelines that require proper mountaineering skills to traverse. They dominate the island in a way that no other mountain in Scotland dominates their landscape. You're always aware of them in Skye, in every direction, in every weather. In the clouds, they are sinister. In the sun, they are breathtaking. In both, they are unmistakably themselves. The Trotternish Peninsula in the north of the island has some of the strangest and most beautiful geology in Scotland. The Kerrang, the Stour, the Kilt Rock. Landscapes that look like they belong to a different planet and that change completely depending on the light and the weather. I have been up to the Kerrang in the early morning before the coaches arrive, and it's one of the finest things I have done in this country. Skye also has Dunvegan Castle, one of the oldest continuously inhabited castles in Scotland, home of the MacLeod clan, the keeper of the fairy flag, which we covered in the clans episode. It has outstanding seafood, it has the Talisker Distillery, one of Scotland's great coastal malls, and it has the kind of dramatic coastal scenery that makes you stop the car, stand at the side of the road, and just look. Go. Just don't go in July. From the most visited island in Scotland to the ones that most visitors never reach at all, the further west you go, the quieter it gets, and the Outer Hebrides are about as far west as Scotland goes. Now, I've not been to the Outer Hebrides. I'm not going to pretend that I have, because I think honesty is more useful than bravado. Lewis and Harris, the Uists, Benbecula, Barra, they're all on my list, firmly on my list. And everything I have read and heard and seen suggests they deserve a great deal more attention than they get. Lewis and Harris are technically one island, but feel like two entirely different places. Lewis in the north is flat and peat covered and has a particular kind of austere beauty that takes some time to understand. Harris in the south has beaches that are, by most accounts, among the finest in Europe. White sand, turquoise water, and virtually nobody on them. People see photographs of the Hebridean beaches and assume they must be in the Caribbean, and they're in Scotland. 2 hours on a ferry from Ullapool, and they're real. The Cannelish standing stones in Lewis are one of the most significant prehistoric monuments in Europe, older than Stonehenge. A stone circle, an avenue that has stood on that exposed headland for 5,000 years, built by people whose names we don't know and whose reasons we can only guess at. There's no visitor centre blocking the view, and you can walk right up to them, put your hands on them. That access, that directness, feels like a privilege that most ancient monuments in Britain no longer allow. In episode 10, I read a listener story from Patricia in Glasgow, whose grandmother came from Lewis and moved to Glasgow in the 1950s and never went back. And I've thought about that story on and off since then. There's just something about the Hebrides, something in what the people say about them, that makes them sound less like a place and more like a feeling. Home in the deepest sense of the word. The kind of home that lives in you even when you've left it. I want to go and find out if that's true, because I suspect that it is. Barra at the southern end of the chain is the only beach airport in the world where scheduled flights land on the sand and the timetables depend on the tides. I want to land on that beach more than I can reasonably explain to you. It has been on my list for quite a while now, and this episode is probably the push I needed to make it happen. From the far west to the far north, if the Outer Hebrides feel like the edge of the world, Orkney and Shetland are the edge of the edge. Orkney and Shetland sit at the very top of Scotland, further north than parts of Norway, and they have a character that is quite unlike anything else in the country. Their history is Norse as much as it is Scottish. Both island groups were part of Norway until the 15th century, and that Viking heritage is still present in the place names, the dialect, the culture, and the particular sensibility of the people who live there. Orkney is extraordinary for its prehistoric remains. The Ring of Brodgar, a stone circle on a narrow strip of land between two lochs, is one of the finest prehistoric monuments in the world. Skara Brae, a Neolithic village on the west coast of mainland Orkney, was buried under sand for thousands of years, and it emerged in the 19th century, almost perfectly preserved. You can look down into the stone-built rooms where people lived 5,000 years ago, with their stone furniture still in place, the dresser, the beds, the hearth. It's one of those places where the gap between then and now collapses completely. I've not been to Orkney or Shetland, and it's something I do intend to fix. Skara Brae alone is enough of a reason for me to want to go. The Ring of Brodgar would be another, but the thing I really want to experience above all else is Up Helly Aa on Shetland. Up Helly Aa is a fire festival held every January in Lerwick, the capital of Shetland. It's the largest fire festival in Europe. A procession of up to 1,000 men in Viking costume, the geysers as they're called, march through the town carrying burning torches, dragging a replica Viking longship. At the end of the procession, the torches are thrown into the longship and it burns. The whole thing is spectacular, dramatic, and completely unlike anything else in the British calendar. I want to stand in that crowd in the dark in January in Shetland with burning torches going past and a Viking longship on fire. That's a sentence I never thought I would say out loud, but I mean every word of it. Shetland also is the highest concentration of prehistoric sites of any part of Britain. Jarlshof in the south of mainland Shetland has evidence of continuous human settlement from the Bronze Age through to the 17th century, with Norse longhouses, a medieval farmstead, and a 16th century laird's house all visible in the same excavated site. Shetland ponies, which are small and extremely determined, are one of the most characterful animals Scotland has produced. And the most extraordinary light, apparently, is in the summer months. Long, golden, lasting well into the evening, in a way that people who have experienced it struggle to adequately describe. Both island groups are on my list. Both of them have been waiting for a very long time. Hopefully they won't have to wait much longer. And from fire festivals and Viking longships to somewhere considerably quieter. Iona is about as far from Up Helly Aa as it's possible to get and still be in Scotland, in every sense. Iona is small, ancient, and vastly underrated. Let me tell you why it deserves to be on your list. Iona is a small island off the southwest tip of Mull, 3 miles long, 1 mile wide. Population of around 150 people. You get there from ferry from Fingal on Mull, a crossing of less than 10 minutes. It's a very small island, and it's one of the most special places in Scotland. St Columba arrived on Iona from Ireland in 563 AD and founded the monastery that became the centre of Celtic Christianity and from which Christianity spread across Scotland and into much of northern England. We mentioned him briefly in the Myths episode in the context of Loch Ness. But he does deserve considerably more than a brief mention, and Iona is the place to understand why. The abbey that stands there now is not the original. That was built in wood and is long gone. But there has been a Christian community on the island for 1,500 years, and that continuity is palpable in a way that is difficult to explain. I visited Iona many years ago, and I want to be honest about what I experienced because I think it's worth being honest about. I'm not a religious person. I don't have a faith, and I'm not looking for one. But Iona did something to me that I can't really fully account for. It wasn't a religious experience in any conventional sense. It was more like, and I'm aware that this sounds so vague, a quality of the place itself, a serenity that doesn't feel constructed or performed, a sense of being detached from the usual pace of things, from the noise and urgency of the mainland, in a way that felt almost physical, like putting something down that you'd been carrying without even realising. I can't explain it, and I'm not going to try too hard to explain it either. What I will say is that I have been to a lot of places in Scotland, and Iona is the one that most people who visit describe in the same way, regardless of whether they're religious, regardless of what they were looking for. They use the same words: peaceful, serene, different. And they say it doesn't leave you even after you've gone back across the water to Mull and driven to the ferry and returned to your ordinary life. It doesn't leave you. And that's been my experience, so I believe it to be true. The island is also stunningly beautiful, in the most uncomplicated sense. White sand beaches on the west coast, the Macher, the low-lying coastal grassland that turns green and flowering in summer, the marble quarry, long disused, where the distinctive green and white Iona marble was cut. The abbey itself, restored and still in use, surrounded by a graveyard where dozens of early Scottish kings were buried, including, according to tradition, Macbeth. Iona isn't on most people's first Scotland itinerary. It should probably be on more of them. Okay, it's not easy to get to. You need to get to Mull first, which involves its own ferry, then drive across Mull, which takes longer than the map suggests, because the road is single track for much of it. But the effort, in every sense, is worth it. Before we finish the islands, there are a few more that deserve a mention, because the Inner Hebrides are not short of places worth your time. We visited Islay in episode 4 in the context of the Fèis Islay, the Whisky Festival, and I'm not going to repeat all of that here, but I want to say again that Islay is one of my favourite Scottish islands, and the reason isn't just the whisky, it's the scale of it, the light, the wildlife, that particular feeling of an island that knows what it is and isn't trying to be anything else. If you've not listened to episode 4, go back and have a listen, because Islay deserves it. Mull is the 4th largest Scottish island, and is the gateway to Iona, as we've just established. It also has its own considerable appeal. Tobermory, the main town on the north coast, is one of the most photographed towns in Scotland. Coloured houses along the waterfront, small harbour, boats. It looks familiar. It might be because it was the filming location for the children's television programme Ballamore, which means a certain generation of parents will recognise it immediately and feel unexpectedly nostalgic. Staffa. Staffa is a small uninhabited island off the west coast of Mull, accessible by boat trip from Mull or Iona, and it's the home to Fingal's Cave, a sea cave formed from hexagonal basalt columns, the same geological formation as the Giant's Causeway in Northern Ireland, because they're part of the same ancient lava flow. The sound of the sea inside Fingal's Cave inspired Mendelssohn to write his Hebrides Overture in 1830. Now, I've not been. Again, it's another one on my list. It's been on my list ever since I first heard about it, and that should tell you something about how many things Scotland puts on your list. That's one of the things I've realised while making this podcast. 13 episodes of Scotland, and my list hasn't got any shorter. If anything, it's got longer. Every time you look at one part of this country properly, you find 3 more parts that need looking at. Scotland keeps revealing itself, and I think that's why people keep coming back. Now on to our listener stories, and these prove to me every week that Scotland gets under people's skin in a way that they don't always expect, And I love that they write in to tell me about it. Honestly, it's becoming one of my favourite parts of doing this. These ones arrived in response to the music episode, which I was really glad about because that episode was quite personal to me, and it's good to know that it landed. The first one is from Carol in Minnesota, and she says, "My family visited Scotland 2 summers ago. On our last night, we ended up in a pub in a small town where there was a band practising in the corner. We hadn't planned on it, we just went in, sat down and ordered drinks as the music started, and we ended up staying for 3 hours. My daughter, who is now 14, hasn't stopped talking about it. She even started learning the fiddle. Every time I hear it screech from our bedroom, I blame Scotland entirely." Carol, Scotland accepts full responsibility and it has absolutely no regrets. Your daughter is going to be brilliant, and hopefully one day she'll make it back here with a fiddle and get a chance to play in the pub where it all began. Wouldn't that be marvellous? Next, we've got Patrick from Boston. Patrick says, "I'm an Irish American and I've always thought of Celtic music as Irish. I listened to your podcast and I started looking into traditional Scottish music properly for the first time. I didn't expect it to be quite so different, and I definitely didn't expect it to hit me the way it did. I owe you an apology and I owe Scotland an apology. Consider both delivered." Patrick, both apologies are very much accepted. In truth, both traditions are related, but are both very distinct, and both of them are absolutely worth your time. Welcome to the Scottish side of the family. Now it's time for your final Scots word of the week, the last one of season 1. This week, hame. H-A-M-E. Hame. The most fundamental word in Scots, and in many ways, the most revealing. Not just the place you live, but the place you belong. The place that exists in you even when you're not there. Hame is what the islands mean to a lot of people who have never lived there. Hame is what Scotland means to a lot of people who have never set foot in it. Hame is what I hope this podcast has felt like, in some small way, to anyone listening from anywhere in the world who wanted to know this country better. Place to come back to. Something that's always waiting for you. And on that note, I want to say a few things before we go. This podcast is something I wanted to do for a very long time. I had the idea for it, I knew what I wanted it to be, and then for quite a while I didn't do anything about it, because starting something new is frightening, especially when it means putting yourself out there in a way that you're not used to. I'm a tour guide. I'm used to talking about Scotland. I'm not used to recording myself doing it, putting it on the internet and asking complete strangers to listen. That required a leap that took me longer to take than I'd like to admit. So if you've listened to one episode, thank you. If you've listened to all 13, thank you enormously and from the bottom of my heart. If you told someone else about it, or left a review, or sent in a listener story, you have no idea how much that meant. This is the kind of thing that doesn't survive without the people who choose to spend their time on it. And you chose to spend yours on this, and I'm grateful for every single one of you. I'm going to be taking a 2-week short break, and then I'll be back. Scotland's not running out of things to talk about, and I'm not running out of enthusiasm for talking about them. And I will see you in just 2 weeks, I promise. In the meantime, I have a wee favour to ask. If there's something about Scotland you would like me to cover, a topic, a place, a piece of history, a question you've always had, send it to me. The best suggestions will shape what comes next. This is your podcast as much as mine, and I want it to go where you want to take it. Send it to hello@everythingscotland.com. I look forward to receiving them. And before you go, subscribe so you never miss an episode when it returns. Leave a review wherever you listen, if you haven't already. It makes a real difference to how many people find the podcast, and I love to read them. You can find us at Everything Scotland Official on social media. Send me your ideas, your stories, your questions, anything that you think will make a good fit for our podcast. I look forward to hearing from you all. I'm Lesley Kennedy. This has been Everything Scotland, Series 1, 13 episodes, one wee country, Slanjava, and safe hame.